All right, everybody. Let's talk about this situation with the braces and the letter that came out today that we learned about from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. And it's related to a clarification, if you will, or an articulated clarification about whether or not these are cool, whether or not they're legal, and how they're legal, right? I think that's probably the first most important thing to establish is that there's nothing coming out right now akin to the bump stock ban, where it's like bump stocks are out no matter what. That is not being said about the braces. Now, I'll admit that I am surprised that there is aggressive action being taken in this direction as relates to the legality and use of pistol braces, braced ARs particularly. I'll get into the details of that at this point. Some point in the future, sure. But when this originally came up as an issue here recently because of the issue with the Q cease and desist letter, because of one of the models that they were selling that hadn't been checked by the ATF and approved specifically, I did not think that was in and of itself indicative of a move against braces. And here's why. If the ATF wants to make it impossible to sell braced pistols, right, they just simply send one email. Hit all the FFLs in the country and say, don't do this anymore. We're not cool with it. It's not cool. You can't do it. And all of a sudden, the ones from Springfield Armory, the ones from Q, the ones from SIG, the ones from CZ, like whoever, like all of a sudden, boom, that doesn't happen anymore. So that didn't happen then, and that's not happening now. Now, none of this is to say that this isn't important. None of this is to say that I'm not concerned about it. None of it is to say that I'm not unhappy about it. The fact that we exist in this realm where we're talking about accessory-based or feature-based infringements, all of this is bad and wrong. I think it's incredibly important, right? Like let's start as a preface that 4473s are an infringement. Certainly, any of the NFA tax stamps, all of this is an infringement to begin with, right? So the idea that I have to pay $200 and fill out some forms and be subject to extra regulation and extra restrictions because I want a suppressor or because I want an SBR, all of that is ridiculous to begin with, right? So that's really important to establish as the backdrop to this. So as we talk about things, however, we aren't talking about things today in the context of 1792, right? We're just not. And if you try to talk about things today in the context of when the Bill of Rights was originally created, you get lost, right? Really quick. Because what's going to happen is you're going to say, well, that's not fair, that's an infringement. But if you filled out a 4473 last week, and now all of a sudden you're like, well, this is an infringement, well, I don't really get it, right? Like the 4473 that you filled out last week or 3 months ago or whatever, the concealed carry permit that you filled out the forms for and took class for, those are infringements too. So I was having a conversation on a live chat a couple days ago with Kevin Dixie, and we came to the conclusion, I think, just in talking it out, that maybe part of the deal is if you're young, right, if you're in your 20s and you have never experienced like the 90s assault weapons ban, and you are in the community post the concealed carry revolution, the shall issue revolution, and now we're seeing the constitutional carry revolution. If you're in the community after all that, okay, I get it. Like you think this is the first time, right? So for you, you're like, I will not comply. Well, again, 4473 is complying, right? Not having an SBR, owning a pistol brace in and of itself, as opposed to a stock, you're already complying. So let's get past that too. Let's get past the ego and the emotion of that. I can't take you seriously. I mean, you can do what you want, but I can't take you all that seriously if you're filling out a 4473 while you're looking at your buddy over your shoulder going, yeah, if they try to make us register things, I'm not going to do it. Well, I don't get it, right? So keep that in mind as another piece of the backdrop. Now let's talk about what's happened. So what apparently is being proposed by the ATF to the Department of Justice is that there's further clarification and guidance that is put out to you and I. Now, of course, I do have a manufacturer's license under Avidity Arms, so I'm an FFL, I'm an FFL manufacturer, have an SOT, but obviously I have this too, right? So as a civilian, as Rob Pincus the civilian, I have braced pistols just like anybody else. So what the ATF is saying is basically they want to take the kind of guidance, very subjective, very arbitrary, very ridiculous, very infringement. The guidance that they would use, for example, with the whole Q situation, to take in the sample from Q and look at it and say, can this be sold as a braced pistol or not? They want to make it very, very clear. They want to make it objectively, explicitly clear to all of us as individuals that we're subject to the same criteria, that it's not all or nothing. In other words, it's not this thing is legal, and because it's legal, do whatever you want with it. I will be 100% honest with you. I, for a number of years now, have been operating that this is legal to be attached to this thing, and I'm just going to do whatever I want with it. I'll give you a little more backstory. I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, I was on a range taping a DVD, back when we were still doing DVDs for Personal Defense Network, on the use of AR pistols. And this is before braces were a big deal. This was probably right around about the time that SIG brace came out. And we were talking about just the tubes and whether or not you could push the tube against your body or you could put the tube up on your cheek or whatever. If you could use it in any way to stabilize the gun other than just strapping it to your arm. And again, braces weren't a big deal. We weren't even talking about that really in this DVD. So an hour-long DVD, worked on it with a buddy of mine, Gray Fox Tactical. Steve came over from Oklahoma. We did it in Ohio, and we taped this DVD. Obviously, there's production costs, there's time, there's effort, there's energy. It was the first DVD he did with Personal Defense Network. Super excited to get this out. Because personally, my history with AR pistols goes all the way back to the 90s. I built my first AR pistol with a kit with a little stubby tube and a small spring and a heavyweight buffer and all this craziness that you had to do back in the 90s during the assault weapons ban. I built my first AR pistol. So I've been in the AR pistols for a long time. And I've never done an SBR, never done a $200 tax stamp, never jumped through that hoop, never wanted to jump through that hoop, never wanted to worry about crossing state lines, all this stuff. So I was excited about putting out an AR pistol DVD, how to use AR pistols. And we showed the sling, pushing against the sling. We showed the push-pull. We did show coming up against the body. We came up against the cheek. We showed all those things, different ways to use it. And one-handed, whatever, full extension. And that was during that time when the ATF came out and said, start cooking here. The ATF came out and said, no, you cannot ever shoulder or touch your body with any tube or any part of an AR pistol or you are breaking the law. So we didn't release the DVD. I had like 3,000, 4,000 DVDs sitting in a warehouse, and I had to talk to my partners at Personal Defense Network, and say, hey, we can't ship it because the ATF just said you can't do half the stuff in the DVD. Now we could have gone like what I would consider the Paladin Press route, which is we're putting it out for educational purposes only. But I don't put out educational purposes that I don't intend for you to use, so why would I put out a DVD that tells you to go out and do something that is a felony? And that was with a lot of caveated language too. Well, then what happened? Like we went back and forth, and about a year and a half later, ATF said, never mind, we were just kidding. We're not going to enforce shouldering. Do what you want. And now braces are out, so do what you want. So I've been in the camp of do what you want. And obviously you can find a lot of video, a lot of demonstrations, a lot of pictures. I'll do it right now. That this is how, right? This is put together, right? I've got a little stop here, a little index point there, right? This is not wrong, in my opinion, under current guidelines from the ATF. Now, what they want to do is they want to put out guidelines that are going to make that explicitly wrong, possibly, maybe. And this is where the clarity really isn't there. Now both personally and in my role as Executive Vice President of Second Amendment Organization, I have called for more clarity from the Department of Justice and the ATF on several different issues. And I think for a long time I wanted more clarity for sure on the brace issue. I thought we had it as end users, which was you can buy it, you can put it on, and you can use it. Go ahead. And the regulation on manufacturers has been a little different. So here we are, and I've talked recently about the difference between the way manufacturers are regulated and controlled versus individuals on the whole non-gun object, right? The do-it-yourself build kits with the polymer 80 thing. So this is a recurring theme, right? The ATF treats manufacturers and FFLs one way and individuals very differently, right? And that's because of the Second Amendment. So in other words, individuals aren't controlled as much as manufacturers and dealers and all this, right? You can sell guns very differently in states where it's legal to do private transfers than a dealer. A dealer has to write it down and has to record certain information and all this stuff. So That's okay if you think of it from the standpoint of a business being regulated. If you're okay with businesses being regulated, which I'm really not, but if you're okay with businesses being regulated, that's very different from an individual having their rights restricted. So now we're talking about the ATF clarifying how these braces can be used, but more importantly, what they can be attached to. So there's a great video out there. I know that Tim over at Military Arms, I've talked to a whole bunch of people all day today, and I really wanted to talk to a whole bunch of people and get some perspective before I shared my thoughts on this, because this kind of came as a surprise to me. And I also have been very, very leery of jumping into, oh, they're coming after braces, as a fear-mongering hyperbole thing. So talked to several different people, including Tim, and I watched one of his videos and part of the other one, the second one he put out. Jared over at Guns and Gadgets, watched his video he put out earlier, talked to, like I said, a lot of people, and my understanding is this, right, is that basically what's happening is if you attach this brace to something probably like this in a lot of ways. In other words, look, this is set up, the thing from here forward, right, including the folder, everything here is set up the same exact way, right, with I think no exceptions, that I would set up a home defense rifle. Now, I love the idea that I can use this as a pistol, that this is a pistol, and it's set up for home defense. It's set up for, operating around a vehicle, relatively close quarters. But when I read the issues of what this can be attached to, my thought is that this is the kind of thing that the ATF is, if this goes through, going to be saying, no, you cannot attach a brace to something like this. This is a POF 308. Okay, so this is a 308 pistol with a 12 plus inch barrel. Obviously got to have a light and a laser on it. I've got my index point, so clearly this is set up to be used with two hands, right? Even if I'm using it like this, I could shoot it like this, but it's heavy, right? I'm not going to hold it out here forever. It's what we would consider a heavy caliber, I think, for an AR platform, a 308. It has a sling, which is something we normally would see on a rifle, not a pistol. It's got the law folder, designed for rifles, not pistols generally. And then it's got the brace. But because this, according to, again, these ridiculous regulations, infringements that we have, the receiver and the gun was sold as a pistol. So to my mind, well, if the ATF wants me to call this a pistol, and this is a pistol brace, this is super cool. That's what's potentially changing, is that no, it's not cool. Now, the opposite end of this would be something like the FK Renault PSD. The FK Renault PSD has a very unique looking magazine well. The base of the grip area of the all steel field pistol had the same configuration. This mag well is designed to be engaged by a brace. And it kind of like, if you think of a reverse of the way a magazine goes into an AK, so it goes in the front and comes up instead of going in the front and rocking back. This goes in this way and rocks up, and then the brace is attached. And this is, obviously there's no place for my second hand to go out here. There's no stabilizing index point, vertical grip, angle grip, any of that. This is clearly designed to have two hands back here or to be fired with a single hand. The brace on this, and I don't have one here, I'm sorry, because I wasn't expecting to have to talk about this here at the Western headquarters. The brace comes back to about here. There's an issue of length of pull from the trigger to the back of the brace. Obviously on this configuration, because this is adjustable, it can be relatively short, where it would go around my forearm if I were to strap myself in, as the brace was originally designed to be used. But I also can extend it to where it would be back at my elbow, and it wouldn't really work, right? People have different size arms, so the adjustability of a brace makes sense, because the different length of arm means we need a different length of pull to this strap. But the ATF is saying, well, if you can extend this way out, like a stock configuration, longer than you would need to strap it to your forearm, then we feel like you may be intending to use it as a stock, which means this is actually a workaround SBR, and we're not okay with that. Well, with the PSD brace, which people will see here in the US relatively soon, you can go look at a bunch of videos I've done over the last 3 or 4 years showing how this brace works. When I had it over in Europe with this gun with that brace. This brace can't be articulated as a stock. It doesn't even come up to the cheek. It actually it comes down and then up to the body, and you pull back against your body. Very short length of pull. So this would be something that is completely within the original guidelines and the original boundaries of the pistol brace concept. So that's not being banned. This is not being banned. But in this configuration, here's what would trump it. And no pun intended, but maybe appropriate. What would trump this out is if I put a 1 to 8 optic on here. If I put a variable power optic with a short eye relief, right? In other words, this red dot, I can hold this out an extension and still use the red dot. If I had, pick your, company. If I had a Riton 1 to 8 on here, clearly my eye has to be close to that to use it, right? So now, if my face has to be within the distance to the magnified optic that I've got, even if it's set at 1 power, the capably magnified optic on the pistol, if my face has to be in a position where it happens to be over the tube or the stock now, right, because that's what I'm using this as, it's a brace, I get it, but if my face has to be over this, just like I would with a stock, the ATF is apparently going to say, nope, doesn't work, you can't do that. Because now we believe your intention is to use this as a rifle. This is not cool, don't get me wrong, but it's not banning braces. It's taking the brace and the relationship that the ATF has with the individual and making it very similar to the way they've been dealing with manufacturers, all right? So, here's a question, right? Is it MJ Younger? How does this eye relief subject even matter, considering they said it was 100% legal to shoulder? Hey, I get you, man. Like, I am 100% with you, right? So what this comes down to is intent. In other words, if you, for practical purposes, can't use it unless it's going to be pushed up against your body, then they're saying, okay, well, clearly your intention is to use this up against your body, not strapped to your arm at extension. And, if that's the case, then it is essentially an SBR configuration, but we're doing it legally without having to do the tax stamp. Obviously, you can do SBRs legally too. So what they're saying is we're not cool with that anymore. This is bad. It is happening under the Trump administration. Everybody knows. I happened to post this morning before this really opened up big. Before I had really got a chance to dive into it, I shared a post from Maj Touré, just reminding everybody, like, if you're still banging the drum of Trump's pro-gun, I don't see it. I understand all the nuances of you can't do anything about it because of this or that or the other thing or whatever. But, this guy tweets about everything, whether he can do anything about it or not. There have been no tweets about this, right? There were no tweets about what happened with Q. There was no tweets about any of this because I don't believe he really cares about the gun rights issue, particularly not now when he's worried about the election issue. So this is happening under the Trump administration. You can jump into a whole bunch of things and say, well, maybe they're trying to curry favor. The ATF, somebody at the ATF is trying to curry favor with Joe Biden. I'm pretty sure Joe Biden likes the ATF. Like, I'm just going out on a limb there. Pretty sure he's happy that they're there, and he knows that they're going to potentially enforce any draconian, ridiculous gun laws that he passes, particularly if Georgia doesn't do what Georgia voters need to do and hold the Senate in Republican hands. So I don't buy into this idea that they can't wait 45 days and just like do it under the Biden presidency. So there's a couple different things you have to wonder, like why now? Holidays, everybody's distracted. Maybe they think people are gonna miss it, and then they're gonna get to put people in jail, or they're gonna say gun owners are violating this new guidance or whatever. Like, I don't know. So why it's happening probably doesn't matter. If this goes through, right? If this is published as guidance, and if this grace period, so let's get to, so what do we do? So the grace period, this actually clarified a lot. Okay, good. So yeah, right, the product's not being controlled. That's the thing. If you see these headlines like the ATF is going to take away the braces, that's not accurate. It's just simply not accurate. It may be like some kind of let me read the future. It might, right? But it's not what's happening right now. And if you want to go into the whole like this could be a precursor, okay. So let's see, if this goes through, can we still change out uppers without issue? Okay, so that's a good question, right? So I don't know, right? Because all this is very still new and gray. But the question would be, okay, so I've got this lower that was sold to me as a pistol, okay? So I can put any other kind of upper on it that I want. The question is, well, if it's got a brace, and I'm saying, okay, let's just say for a second, all right, I'm going to take this off, and I'm going to take this and I'm going to put a remote wire back on it, or I'm going to put some other laser light situation on it where I can run it with a grip pressure switch, right? So now there's not an overt, obvious, I'm expecting to put my hand out here somewhere, right? Because obviously that's what I'm expecting to do. It's the only way to run that, and that's the only reason to have this here. So I take those off, and I say, no, I have no intention of putting my hand out here anywhere. Why would you ever think such a thing? I'm only going to shoot it one-handed. The problem is, if I were to put a magnified optic on here, that doesn't float. So if you're saying, well, could I put a magnified optic and a 17-inch barrel and a stock on my pistol? Probably no, because this has been sent to you as a pistol, sold to you as a pistol. And we're going to get into the what if you register a thing in a second as an SBR. Then yes, obviously, right? But if you don't, well, this is still a pistol. So you can't put a stock on it. Could you take this off, put a magnified optic on it? Yeah, sure, except now you're like trying to hold it in front of your face with the magnification without it touching your body, because you just have the tube, or you're going to touch the tube to your body. Well, I don't know, it doesn't involve the brace, right? So there's still a lot of issues there. Yeah, actually, so younger, the whole thing with travel restrictions on SBRs, everybody that follows me, I'm a nomad, I'm constant motion, right? I'm out here in Colorado, I have my place in Florida. The whole idea that I'm going to call, email, I've never done it because I don't want to have to deal with the travel restrictions, right? And then also the knock on the door, we're here to inspect your NFA items. Nobody wants that, right? So let's get to now, so what are we going to do? So there's apparently going to be an opportunity for people to say, oh, my bad, I thought this was legal because you said I could shoulder it and you said I could put it on here, so everything's cool. And now I don't know what to do. So what they're going to do is they're going to say, okay, well, you have X number of days or months or whatever. There's going to be like a grace period where, because you, citizen of America, thought you were doing something legal, and there's some weird language in there, like as if the manufacturers or the retails misled us. That's, I don't think, fair at all. But you, because of what you were told by the manufacturers, you thought this was okay, so you bought it. And now you're out here doing your thing, and we saw you in Rob's class doing the thing. We saw Rob's video where he was teaching you to do the thing, but we're telling you can't do that thing anymore unless you register this as an SBR. And what we're going to do is we're going to make that easier, faster, whatever, and here's the trick. You don't have to pay the $200 tax stamp. Okay, so if the only reason you didn't do an SBR was the $200 tax stamp, well, okay, you just go ahead, get all the SBRs registered that you own that have this before the date, that have the brace, go ahead and register them as SBRs if you would have done it anyway. Because what's really different, right? You're saying, well, I would have done it, but I couldn't afford the $200, or I couldn't justify the $200, and I have 5 of them, so it's $1,000. Okay, I'm on every list there's going to be, right? I mean, again, with the FFL, everything else that I obviously do in the industry, like I'm already on that list. So and I filled out a bunch of 4473s in my time. So am I increasing my compliance, or am I endangering myself as far as a knock on the door that says, hey, we know you have guns, because I register this as an SBR? Nope. Neither would anybody else. Like, so if you have a suppressor, if you have SBRs, if you have legal full auto, if you have a concealed carry permit, if you fill out a 4473, you're already on the list, right? So what we're really talking about is, what about the person who's never done it, right? And here's the other thing is like, so see like Jacob Zuckman, if you fill out a 4473, or you have an SBR, or you have a suppressor, and you've already filled out all the paperwork, it's like, I don't even get that. Let's talk about the person over here who has never filled out any of that, right? If you're watching this and you've built do-it-yourself kits from non-gun items, and you bought guns legally for cash, and you don't have a concealed carry permit, and you live in a concealed carry, constitutional carry state, and you're not on any lists, you believe you're not on any lists, except that you're on Facebook, but Instagram. If you think you're on any list, well then, okay, it's completely different, right? So now you're in a completely different category, where you have a whole bunch of different conversations in your head that you have to have. Do you want to be on the list just so you can have the thing set up the way you have it? Or are you going to keep yourself off the list and not have the thing the way you have it? Or are you just going to get rid of the brace entirely and go back to whatever you were doing 5 years ago before these things were out there in common usage? I don't know. right? Like there's still a lot of space between this and between where we are now and me saying, here's what I think you should do. I haven't even decided what I'm going to do, right? Again, I'm on all the lists, but I feel like, it's not appropriate to just say, oh, you want me to register this thing, so I'm going to do it. Well, what are the practical realities of it? Well, one of the big practical realities of it was brought up a minute ago about the travel restrictions and about the come into the house, we want to inspect where you're storing your NFA items, because this becomes an NFA item. That's a big deal. I really like what you're saying there, now Younger, also on the idea of, well, wait a minute, if 1 million people register and say, yes, I have this configuration, and these things have been out, again, millions of these things, right, or millions of people using these things over the last 5 years or so, well, there's been no increase in violent crime connected to these things. There's been no increase in mass shooters, school shooters, any of that. We just had 1 million people say, oh yeah, well, I've had one forever. Yeah, I'll jump through your hoop. Well, there is an argument that could be taken into court that, well, okay, these things are now common usage. You can't come in like the bump stock and say, well, they're really isolated and we're going to get rid of them. Nobody's going to care. You get, 5% of American gun owners come in and say, oh yeah, I want this and I'm willing to jump through this hoop now. What else happens? Well, then SBRs, it's not just the brace, it's SBRs that are common usage issues, right? That's the trick. So I don't know how many individual American gun owners have SBRs registered right now, but I imagine that the percentage would increase. I imagine that we would see that it more than doubled if all of a sudden everybody with a braced pistol was registered as an SBR. So there is that argument. There's also an argument that says, well, they could have, again, we go back to where I started the video, they could have just said, no more, period, you're done. Well, okay, if no more, period, you're done was what they wanted, they could do that. So where's the trick, right? What's the gotcha? And this is something that has to be thought about. There's something that has to be talked about. Again, I don't dismiss this, and I'm certainly not saying, oh yeah, get ready to fill out your forms, that makes sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me yet. But again, none of this really makes sense at this point. We have to, first of all, you can go watch the other videos. Everybody I've watched you on these videos, they've talked about very, very important. We can respond to this, right? Now, whether they listen to us or not, now if you send them, the blood needs to be watered with the tree blood of tyrants, freedom, go fuck yourself, ATF. Like if that's your email, it's not going to help. Right? If you write an articulate email like, hey, here's why I have this, here's what I want to be able to defend my family, I'm in my vehicle, I don't want the heavy extra, I don't need a long barrel for the ballistics I'm looking for, whatever, but I also want the control that I get from the brace, and yes, I have strapped it on my arm, yes, there are other ways to use it, and I get it, but if you wanted to write an articulate letter, probably a really, really good idea. Right, to get involved, to actually, when this is out for public scrutiny and this is out for, hey, do you think this is a good idea, as an American gun owner, and we'll probably come up with something from 2AO.org, I'll put something in the blog, here's where you send the letter, here's probably some good ideas about how to write the letter. I'm sure that other organizations, GOA is usually really good at this, like print this out and send this, right, here's the verbiage. I always suggest you customize that a little bit, right, because if somebody gets 30,000 of the same letter, eventually their eyes just glaze over, right? So at least at the beginning, right? Let me go back here. I want to see something. Big question at this point. What can we do to best fight this other than simply donate? Yeah, I wouldn't say just donate to the organizations, right? Obviously, there's going to be lawsuits. There's going to be those kinds of things. I think FPC is definitely leading the charge on every front in terms of court cases right now. Second Amendment Foundation, for a long time, they were the company or the organization that I would have said were the leaders in this realm. There's other entities that are jumping in. When you say, so Zach says, what's the harm in just putting a stock on it, on an AR pistol? Well, here's the problem. Like you're willfully and intentionally saying, I don't care what the law is, I'm going to break the law. Now, I get that that's really easy to say on the internet. I'm just in the position of saying, well, again, if you have a concealed carry permit and you're filling out 4473s, what made this special that now you're willing to put a stock on this, right? So if somebody's done, if somebody's like civil disobedience, I'm out, right? I'm not renewing my CCW permit. I'm never filling out another 4473. I'm not going to buy the cool new gun. I'm not going to get that, custom whatever that I have to go to the gunsmith and he's going to put it in the books. I'm never dealing with the whole NICS system again. Cool, like I get that, I respect that. But if you're buying the latest, newest, greatest gun from your local dealer on a 4473, but you're saying, oh, anybody who does this is a traitor to the cause, I don't get it. Like I just don't get it. I understand there could be some rationalization going on for how to get it, but I don't get it. So if this is your line in the sand, cool, but I hope it's retroactive, right? In other words, when someone's like, nope, I'm an outlaw, and then the next week goes to 4473 and fills it out because they want the latest, greatest SIG or Glock or whatever that they can only buy new from a dealer, now I don't get you. Like, there's no integrity there. So this is something that the community is obviously going to be talking about a lot. Something you guys are going to have to talk about, because the deal is, if this gets passed, if we don't write enough letters, if we don't convince Department of Justice, and again, everything's changing, right? New administration, new attorney general, new head of the ATF. I doubt they're going to listen to us, right? Let's be honest. This proposal is probably going to go through. And is it as bad or worse? Is it nefarious? Is it death by 1,000 cuts? Is it slippery slope? What it's not is a ban on braces. As I understand it, if I'm going to say, well, I want to have this, right? This is a big if I want to have this, and now I'm going to get a free opportunity to get this registered as an SBR, that changes everything for me personally. Forget about the businesses. Me personally, that means I have a travel restriction on it, and that also means that I have to have it stored in a place that could be accessible by the ATF to come in and inspect it. I'm not comfortable with that. But on the other hand, it also means I don't need a brace. Once this is an SBR, then I don't need this and I can put a stock on it, right? So this really is all about the decision, to me, really comes down to, are you already on the list for NFA items? Would you have been on the list for NFA items if it weren't for the $200 stamp and it was just about the money? Well, then there's no real difference here, right? You're changing nothing. Emotionally, I get it, but practically you're changing nothing. For me, because I'm not on the NFA list as an individual, it changes a whole bunch, and that's a different scenario entirely. If you're real, but again, I'm already on every list other than the whole travel restriction, and you can come into the apartment to see where I store my SBR that's registered to me here, right? The other stuff. If you're on no list, this is a much bigger personal deal for you. We're going to see how this plays out. We're going to see, obviously, what the leadership of the community thinks, right? When you look at SAF and gun policies, Firearms Policy Coalition's Instagram. You look at what they're going to say, you look at what SAF is saying, you look at what Gun Owners of America, what they're going to say, what your state organizations are going to say. Just what you hear from YouTube, and obviously a lot of those guys are my friends and they do great work, and I really do think most of them have the best intentions. They think that the way they do things, even if it sounds a little hyperbolic or they sensationalize things, or if there's clickbait in the title of a blogger's article, take that with a grain of salt. Listen to what is being put out. I'm obviously going to put out new information. I waited all day. I woke up, 5:30, 6 o'clock this morning. Inbox was already full out here, Colorado time, and I'm not jumping into this yet. And I've spent all day thinking about it, talking to people about it, researching it. Here's where I am. Where I am is, I don't know yet. We need to see how this plays out. I would definitely get ready to write a letter to let anybody who's looking at this know that we believe that this configuration should not be regulated, whether this is a stock or not, but particularly in this case where in good faith American gun owners have tried to not violate existing regulations, even though we realize those laws are infringements as it is, by buying this thing instead of just putting a stock on a short-barreled AR. And we don't believe that now, retroactively, we should be put in a position of having to jump through another hoop, a regulatory hoop, that is going to inconvenience us and open up our private residences and storage areas to inspection from the ATF, where we never have been subjected to that before. Completely inappropriate. If you want to do that, then come at us, right? Like, that's kind of the way it works, right? If you want registration and you want mandatory storage and you want inspections, you can't take guns across state lines, come at us. Let's have that fight in the courts, right? As opposed to, we all own these things, we've invested in them, we use them, and now you're going to take that path of least resistance and sort of try to co-opt or almost tease American gun owners into jumping into the whole NFA thing when they obviously weren't ready to do it, willing to do it, interested in doing it, when we had this as a legal option. So let me see, at this point, what would be the harm in just, okay, so we saw that one. Let me see what else we got here. Stock and a binary stays in state versus a cowboy. Not sure what that means. I feel like it's absurdly over-categorized. Absolutely. Like all of this, right? All of this is incredibly ridiculous, right? And again, I go back to the beginning of the video. All of this is wrong, right? So don't take anything I'm saying to mean I'm okay with this. I'm not okay with it. I'm not okay with the fact that I have to have this as a legal option, right? As opposed to just have a stock and not have to worry about the tax stamp and everything else. There's a question here from Spence. This is important too. The case in Ohio a couple years ago on an AR pistol with a brace that the ATF lost. Absolutely 100% true that they lost that case. I think the concern, and this is a concern that several people have expressed today, is that if they put out this guidance, right, now that if that guidance, the way they've written it, had existed prior to the case in Ohio, they might not have lost the case in Ohio. So yeah, there's a legal precedent, except now what they're doing is they're going to go back and say, well, yeah, we get it. We lost the case in Ohio. This is why we told American gun owners that here's where we are. We gave them this opportunity to register it as an SBR for free and expedited, and yet this guy still chose to do this in a configuration that we told him wasn't okay. He didn't take advantage of the opportunity we gave him, and therefore we think he's in violation of the law, and that case might get won because the circumstances have changed. So yeah, absolutely, they lost. Maybe this is, again, a result of what we're seeing this week is a result of the fact they lost that case. And like, how can we not lose the next one? Oh, I know. Well, let's tell them explicitly and give them a chance to, without confiscating, without banning, without having to pay the $200, let's give them a chance to get on the right side of the law from their perspective, obviously. So I think that's it. One case, dispute the proper length of pull measurement, which is not clarified in draft. Oh yeah, so it is, the whole length of pull thing is silly, right? Because my arm is a different length than I'm sure a lot of your arms, right? So the length of pull thing really doesn't make a lot of sense in an objective way. And I think this is the dangerous part, is that if they were to say, well, it can't be more than 11 inches, or it can't be more than 7 inches, it can't be more than 14 inches, somebody is going to be able to, you're going to get, my daughter, right? So if I have now there's the other thing about the caliber, right? But if I have like a 9mm, so a 9mm AR pistol for my 5-year-old absolutely would be justified as a heavy caliber for her and strap this to her arm. Well, the length of pull for me to my forearm is going to be able to reach her chest, quite obviously, right? The length of pull for her to reach her forearm might barely get past my thumb and down to my wrist. So it's very hard to be objective. So what's going to happen? Well, they're going to say, okay, this is your arm, right? Here's Rob's arm, and here's Rob's AR pistol. Rob puts his hand on the grip. Where is the brace? Is the brace in the right place, or is the brace in the wrong place, right? And so that's the potential issue. Is that if I've got my arm, I could probably get away with saying, oh yeah, I could definitely put the brace around my forearm here. It's not quite to the elbow joint. But if I were here, right, now there's no way that's not how this is designed to be used around the bicep. This is designed to be used around the forearm, right, up in this area. So that's going to be how that's judged. It's not, we're not going to get an objective, this is the length of pull. It's going to be relative to the person on the range that day, or in the Instagram video, whatever, at the store, coming in to get a new optic mounted. It's going to be a case-by-case basis. And as we know with these things, all it takes is one local cop or one overzealous, ATF agent hanging out in a gun shop to see you with your pistol and say, hey, let me check that out, and you've got a vertical foregrip, and you've got a magnified optic, and you've got a sling, and you've got an adjustable brace that's all the way out. This is what apparently is going to get you in trouble in the future. And the argument that a lot of people are making is, if you wanted an SBR, just go ahead and SBR it now for free, right? You don't have to wait. You don't have to pay the $200. What you do have to do, though, however, is deal with the inspection requirements and deal with the travel restrictions, which I think are huge deals. And that's getting missed in some of the, may as well just SBR it. I don't agree. It's a big difference for a lot of people if you don't already have the suppressor and you don't already have an SBR. So I think I'm just going to get redundant here and kind of keep saying the same things. More information obviously will be coming out. Keep an eye on AmmoLand. You know, John Crump's on top of this stuff. Keep an eye on what Jared's doing over at Guns and Gadgets. Keep an eye on what Tim's doing over at Military Arms Channel. Those are the guys that I look at to see what they're saying. Obviously make some phone calls in the background, and then I share my thoughts with you guys. Have a good night.